Welcoming you, Paul, and everyone that is going to watch this video for this conversation. I feel quite moved. First of all, very grateful that we are doing this and that you are here with us. And also excited and a little bit nervous. Whenever I was touching into collective healing themes, it's also mean touching my own healing and my own self. So I'm also feeling like, just soft and vulnerable and open to see what is coming up. And today we are going to talk about the situation in the Middle East, in Israel, Palestine, and what we can do as people who are connected to that identity, as Israelis, as Jewish people, and actually whoever is somehow influenced by this, and receive some insights and hopefully tools and perspectives into how to work with what's going on right now and how to navigate, how to relate. And maybe even before starting, I just want to say that this is very activating type of theme. So please, as you watch, take a moment for yourself. You can stop the video and also, see how it moves in you and take it in your own way. And now, I would love to introduce you, Paul, to welcome you to the conversation. I can definitely start from the biography. So Paul is a pioneer in the field of spiritual emergence and is a wounded healer in private practice, helping others who are also awakening to the dreamlike nature of reality. I just really love that sentence because I really do feel that this is what you are and what you're doing. And I can say that Paul is a super prolific, generous writer and artist. You wrote a few books about Wetiko, several books, which you will talk about in this conversation, and also a very beautiful and touching autobiography / case study about your own healing journey and your own trauma called Awakened by Darkness, and then just an awesome book about quantum physics called Quantum Revelation. And as you can hear, I'm a fan. I've had the privilege and honor to be working with you in the past months on my own writing, finding my own writing voice, my book voice. So I'm very, very grateful for you, Paul, to be here. And thank you for coming today.
I'm so excited, and I'm really happy to share my work. I've created this body of work about a mind virus, about the Wetiko mind virus, that if people haven't heard about it, it can really help us to contextualize what's happening in the Middle East right now. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Faye.
So maybe we can start with that. If you can sort of map or sketch a little bit, how do you see things and how do you understand what's happening right now in the Middle East, in Israel, Palestine? How do you see that?
Well, it's something, I'm really, like any feeling sentient being, really distressed by what's happening. And I try to understand it as best I can. But it really helps me to see it through the lens of Wetiko. Wetiko is a Native American term that really connotes one way of thinking about it. It's a mind virus. And I've written 3 books about it, pointing out that it's a virus of the mind, of the psyche, and it's the real virus that we should be concerned about, because it's at the bottom of the insanity, of the collective insanity that we're playing out all over the planet. And the Middle East is sort of like an acute inflammation of a systemic illness. And that being said, what's playing out, it's actually revealing something to us. So in other words, what I'm pointing out is that what's playing out in the Middle East, when we get our microscope really focused on that acute outbreak, that it's a revelation. It's showing us how this mind virus works. It's actually reflecting something in each and every one of us that can be profoundly healing when you have the recognition that what's playing out in the outer world in Gaza, for example, is reflecting something that's happening deep within the collective unconscious of humanity. And I would point out that seeing this is the very way that we begin to step towards some sort of healing. Because as long as we're absorbed in the melodrama on whatever side of the polarity, projecting the shadow on this person or that group or whatever, we're just part of the problem, yeah.
So you mean it's recognizing that what is happening on the world stage and in the collective as war, as acts of violence is actually an internal, is a quality or an experience that is actually internal and accessible for each of us personally. Is that what you're saying also?
Yeah. I think what would be helpful for me to say a little bit more about Wetiko just to create a foundation for understanding this dialogue. And so it's a mind virus, and it really connotes the spirit of evil, but I point out that it's a quantum phenomena, and what I mean by that is, just like in quantum physics, they were trying to understand what is the nature of light, and they realized, it manifests as a wave or a particle, which are completely opposite manifestations depending on how it's observed. And so this mind virus, the Wetiko mind virus, contains holographically encoded within it both the deepest evil, and it actually contains not only its own vaccine and its own medicine, but it's actually helping us to evolve. It's helping us to awaken. That's what I mean, that it's a quantum phenomenon. How it will manifest, will it take us down and kill us, or will it wake us up? That all depends if we have the recognition of what it's showing us. Now, the thing about Wetiko, it's a form of blindness. It's a psychic form of blindness that is really a peculiar form of blindness because it doesn't know that it's blind. And not only that, it thinks it's actually more sighted than people who are actually seeing. Now, also, Wetiko, this mind virus, works through the projective tendencies of the mind, because we're always projecting onto the waking inkblot, but it works through the projective tendencies of the mind in such a way that we entrance ourselves, that we hypnotize ourselves. And then one final thing about Wetiko, just to create the most simplest thumbnail sketch of it, is that it's an inner disease of the soul. We all have it in potential because it exists in the collective unconscious, but it's an inner disease of the soul that has this magical ability to somehow extend itself in the world and configure events in the world, in our individual lives and collectively through world events, so as to reveal and express itself. So that's an amazing statement. It's an inner disease of the soul that actually somehow reveals and expresses itself through the medium of the outside world. That's just like a dream. Because a dream, when you're in a dream, your inner process that you're having in your psyche is actually getting externalized and dreamed up through the seemingly outer forms of the dream. So what this mind virus can do, it can actually help us to awaken to the dreamlike nature, which is our true nature, and expand our consciousness, open our heart, unlock our creativity, cultivate our compassion and love. It's amazing the benefits of this, but if we don't recognize that it's a revelation, this mind virus, it will assume its programmed function and just kill us. So the takeaway is that what's playing out in the Middle East is a reflection on the world stage of something that's happening deep inside of every one of us. And to recognize that correlation, that's to begin to see the dreamlike nature where the microcosm and the macrocosm are reflections of each other. And that's all of a sudden to be able to get our hands into the process in a way that can be actually helpful.
So what I'm hearing is that it's actually sort of a nightmare that we're in, right? That is being enacted through us not knowing that we are dreaming it, right? Like it happens through actions, because this is people doing things, people not doing things happening in reality. But in a way, it acts as a nightmare. And so I'm really curious in that sense, like coming back into the personal perspective, what is the the role of nightmares. Like, why do we even have nightmares?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because in one of my books on Wetiko, I actually coined the phrase. I call it it's the nightmare mind virus because it literally creates nightmares. And the thing about nightmares that are really interesting, like if you have this recurring nightmare, and if you don't have the recognition of what it's reflecting and expressing inside of you, because a dream is nothing other than a projection, a reflection of the mind. If you don't have that recognition, what happens? Then it just recurs again and again and again, typically in more and more amplified form, until you finally get the message of what's actually being shown to you. And then typically once you get the message and integrate, the message, then the nightmare doesn't happen anymore. So there's something if you look at history, world history, there's something that's reiteratively, recursively, and I use that word recursively like it's a curse, just recreating itself through us again and again and again. And here we are in the exact same point that we've been in all throughout history, just in a modern variant. And, and are we going to recognize that? So in other words, what I'm basically saying is that we are having a revelation, but instead of the revelation coming from the heavens through a beam of light, no, it's coming through the darkness. It's, and that's why it's really forcing us to come to terms with our own dark side, and not just personally, but archetypically with evil, And just one final thing, and I'm happy to expand upon this because it's important. The psychological process that underlies Wetiko that is playing out so profoundly in the Middle East with Israel and Gaza is the psychological process of projecting the shadow outside of ourselves. And that's something I'm happy to expand upon because it's really profound.
Right, and that kind of brings us also to like the question of what to do, right? Because this conversation should be, or I hope that it's an encouragement and can really give tools for us to understand what to do. And maybe I will say just quickly that I feel this time that we are having this conversation is very, it's very strong potentially. Like I feel that as an Israeli and someone that is understanding a little bit what's going on from my own perspective, I see that a lot more Israelis are starting to understand what is happening in Gaza. Like the walls of denial are starting to crumble. And a lot of people are starting to panic, like to realize, oh, wow, we're actually, this is genocide, or this is really, really bad, and starting to deal with a lot of shame and a lot of fear of prosecution, of anti-Semitism, and it's very challenging to face the shadow that is being projected outside and to start to understand that, no, this is actually part of myself. And so maybe you can talk more about this kind of reclaiming or recognizing the shadow as me, and how do we deal with that, both like psychologically, personally, but also collectively as a culture or as a,
Well, the thing you're saying about, and I'm happy to hear that maybe in Israeli society, people are snapping out of the denial, because denial is interesting because it's a feedback loop. When you're in denial, then you're in denial that you're in denial. So then your energy gets invested in protecting against reflecting upon this black hole of denial that you've fallen yourself in, and that's a form of Wetiko right there. Now, the thing that I was saying about projecting the shadow, I'll describe how it works, and this is the underlying psychological dynamic of Wetiko. So say if I'm not owning like a dark part of myself for whatever reason, right? Now, say if I'm in a dream, in a night dream, and there's like the shadowy part of myself, but I'm not able to really see it, to own it, to work with it as my own, well, then what happens? I'm actually unconsciously trying to exterminate it. I want to get rid of it. And so then what happens, just remember, anything unconscious, it always approaches us from outside of ourselves. We project it out. outside
Right.
onto some person or group of people who then carry our own disowned shadow. Now, in a dream, if I project out my shadow onto some other, into the dream will walk some person or group of people who are then, they have the hook, like putting a coat on a hook. They all of a sudden will, in my mind, embody my own evil that I've split off from.
Right.
And then I see them as embodying my own evil. And of course, by doing that, I've split my own self because then I'm identified, no, I'm all light and good and white, and they're all dark and evil. And so there's that polarization, the inner polarization in my mind that started the whole process is now playing out in the outside world. Now, when you amplify that process, what am I going to do if I'm projecting a shadow on somebody and somebody into my dream, waking or a night dream, embodies that shadow? When I amplify that, I try to kill them because by doing that, I'm actually acting out in the outside world the very internal process of trying to kill and exterminate my own darkness. I'm actually enacting my inner process via the medium of the outside world. If you remember,
Right.
Wetiko is an inner disease of the soul that actually manifests itself through the medium of the outside world. And by doing that, by trying to destroy them, because I think they're the carriers of evil and they're not even human beings, guess what? I've become possessed by the very evil that I'm trying to destroy in them. And, and of course, they're probably doing the same to me. And that's shadow projection. Jung, the great doctor of the soul, calls shadow projection the lie. And just, symbolically, just to associate who's the liar? Well, who's the father of lies? It's the devil. The idea being that projecting the shadow is itself the shadow acting itself out in the world. And then when we surround ourselves with other people who are of like mind, who also project the shadow on a particular group, whoever that group is, then we have confirmation, we have all the agreement, and we develop an echo chamber, and we're all
Right.
seeing the same evil projected on the same group. And then anybody who actually reflects that we've fallen into a state of madness, they get demonized and seen as a threat. And this process just feeds on itself. It's a self-replicating feedback loop. That's Wetiko in a nutshell, right there.
So it gets amplified by other people in the field. And then we can also see that there are like ideologies or mind frames that kind of support that. Like, for example, okay, there are the humanists who say, oh, we don't want violence, we don't want war, but we have to, or we are just protecting ourselves. And then there are those people in the Israeli field who are saying, no, like, we want to kill them because this is how you take care of yourself, because we were prosecuted and it's us or them. And it has always been like that through all the generations. And also they might say, that this is the human nature, that violence is part of the human nature, and we just need to see that and like step up and take care of ourselves. So I'm just bringing also another, that's not my voice, at least not my choice of how I want to create in the world, but that's definitely voices that I can hear in the Israeli society. And I was wondering, like, can you say something around, yes, there is the projection of shadow outside, but then there are also, like, let's say, supporting mind frames that create kind of like, beyond the amplification of number, that create kind of the context that allows for this projection to continue blindly. Or, it's sort of integrated into the worldview.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that, part of that, the agreement is there's no self-reflection. Like, if somebody were to come in and say, oh, wow, this group of people that you want to exterminate, that say you want a genocide, they're actually, when you really go into it, they're actually reflections of you. They're not part of you. You see, the thing, I'm this Jewish person, and what really concerns me, it's like being in a family and seeing a family member unconsciously act out in a way that is going to destroy them. Like, I want to point out to, Israel, that what you are doing is guaranteeing, 100% guaranteeing your self-destruction. There's no doubt about
Right.
that. But that's a characteristic of when we get taken over by Wetiko, we unconsciously act out in a way where we destroy ourselves. And, and so here I am, a family member, trying to say that, and yet it's dangerous because Wetiko
Yeah.
creates a field, a non-local field, where it's dangerous if you shed light on the darkness or if you try to hold up a mirror. And the word mirror, etymologically, it means holder of the shadow. If you hold up a mirror to, whether it's a person or a government or a people or a nation who are acting out in a way that's ensuring their own self-destruction, they will see you as a threat and demonize you and potentially try to, to shut you down or censor you. So interesting, when Wetiko is in the field, it's dangerous to speak your voice. But it's gotten to the point now where, I can't stay silent anymore about this,
Right. Yeah, totally. And I think this is a cycle that we are in, because it's all about, the lie is telling about survival. It's really touching those frequencies that are, let's say, of the bottom chakras, right, of the unconscious. For example, now there was a letter for Israeli artists, around 2,000 people who signed a letter that they are against what is happening in Gaza. And then there was a huge reaction wave of people like canceling concerts and going against those artists that signed that letter, and a lot of them lost work. So there is this dynamic where on the one hand you want to say, hey, we are actually killing ourselves here, and on the other hand you are risking in your, like, hurting your own livelihood and of course belonging in society, which for many, not for me personally by now, but but for many it's a real survival issue to be ostracized from society. And that's a real, like, if we're going now towards like more practical steps, like somebody watching this video and say, okay, great, I get the principle, but what can I do about this? How can I work with seeing and recognizing, and what does that even mean, like, practically?
Well, a thing I just want to say before I forget, and then I want to get to what can we do, because that's really the important question. But I want to point out, it's clear to me that if you see, just Israel as an entity, as this being, as this living being, what they are doing is they're acting out of unhealed trauma. Because to the extent, there's an incredible, being brought up Jewish, I know there's an incredible trauma, being a Jewish person, particularly having been born after the Second World War, and my parents were completely traumatized by what happened in the Holocaust and all that. And that trauma, and think about that trauma, the Jewish people were the recipients of another more powerful, at least militarily, group wanting to exterminate them and destroy them. And to the extent that, that the Jewish people haven't integrated and healed that trauma, they're going to be compelled to unconsciously enact it on whoever, and that whoever I point out in my work are the Palestinians who are actually cast in the role that the Jewish people were cast in the Second World War. And it's so obvious, And so in other words, by enacting unconsciously, compulsively, their own unhealed trauma, the Jewish state is actually re-traumatizing other people the way they have been traumatized, and they're continually re-traumatizing themselves. There's nothing good. There's nothing good, and not only nothing good, what is getting enacted on the world stage, in Israel and Gaza, and Iran and Syria and the whole Middle East, it's Wetiko getting revealed. It's a revelation. But it will continue to just manifest in its, sort of evil aspect of just endless destruction, including destruction of Israel, unless enough of us recognize it as a revelation. And then the question is, what do we do? So that's really the question.
Yeah. And also maybe before we get there, we're kind of postponing it, but like, can you say one last thing about Wetiko and what it wants and what it serves? Because to awaken us to the fact, or to reality as a dream, that we are collaborating in dreaming together. Is that what it wants? It wants to make us whole,
Yeah.
like for us
Yeah.
to. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, totally. And keep in mind how I'm such an expert and authority on Wetiko is that I had a direct, unmediated encounter with it.
Yes.
You know, because you read my autobiography, that
Yeah.
destroyed my entire family. I haven't had a family for close to a quarter of a century. Almost, drove me crazy, almost killed me. And yet here I am, having come through that and realizing, oh, that was my own shamanic initiatory ordeal. And
Right.
it's empowered me to be able to have some little gift to be able to share. And one of the gifts is my work on Wetiko. So if Wetiko didn't exist, it's so important for the evolution of our species, we would have to invent it. Because Wetiko, it's catalyzing the evolution of our species. It's actually showing us the profound importance of the human psyche in creating our experience. And if why I say this, if you see it as a dream, so say if somebody had a dream, and the dream was exactly what's happening in the world, all over the world, and what's happening in the Middle East, and they came to my office and they said, wow, I had this incredible dream, and the dream is exactly what's happening current day. And they would ask me, how would you interpret that? What is the meaning of the dream? And I would say to them, well, clearly you're not in touch with your creative, with yourself, with your creative power, with your creative agency.
Right.
So you're outsourcing
Exactly.
that, and the state and the powers that be are using your own creative power against you. What the dream is revealing to you is you need to consciously connect with your own creative agency. And this segues into what do we do? Because Wetiko, it both simultaneously, it shuts down our creative impulse and spirit, while at the same time stimulating it and demanding we get in touch with it. And that's what we can do. Being creative involves finding our voice, which has to do with finding our vocation, which has to do with finding our genius, which has to do with finding our inner guidance and our inner self, our true self. But if we don't connect with that daimon, the inner voice, the muse, the angel, there are a lot of different names which are pointing at it has a miracle quality. That inner voice constellates negatively and becomes a demon. Okay? So the point is that encoded in that daimon, which really is the inner voice, it's both evil or angelic. Once again, it's very quantum. But this whole what's playing out is demanding that we consciously connect with our inner creative spirit and express ourselves creatively and find our inner voice in whatever medium. And of course, that's very challenging because, like you were saying, people in Israel, artists who were saying that, all of a sudden people are boycotting their concerts. It takes incredible courage to do that.
Yeah. So I was just listening to the last things you said and was just so happy because, I really resonate with that. And maybe we can even go a little bit closer and break it down into steps, because when we talk about healing trauma, we cannot just, someone who's in the corner of a room, like completely scared and fearing prosecution and having all these kinds of ideas about the world out to get you, and then you're going to tell them, oh, just use your creative vocation. What are the steps that are needed? So this is for every person watching this, but this is also like, how do you work with family members? How do you work with your communities? Like, what are the stages that are needed to support us in awakening to this reality without being completely crushed by shame, by humiliation, by guilt, right? So this is a real question that I'm asking about approaching the Israeli or the Jewish psyche right now and starting to bridge this process.
No, totally. And I appreciate you bringing it back to okay, this can be all sound wonderful, but what do we do? How do we moment by moment with our relations and families and all that? And the one thing that comes up really strongly is that one of the gifts of Wetiko is that it's forcing us to connect with our true nature, with who we actually are. Because, every spiritual tradition talks about Wetiko, right? And for example, in Christianity, in the Bible, they'll talk about, in the apocryphal text, they'll call it the counterfeiting spirit. It's an imposter. So Wetiko has no creativity at all. It plugs into our unconscious creativity and turns it against us. That's why the importance of being creative. But it's a mime. It's a master mime. It impersonates us. If we're not awake in that moment to our nature, we then, like putting on a suit of clothes, we identify with Wetiko's false version of ourselves. Oh, I'm limited, I'm helpless, I'm wounded, I'm traumatized. And then it has us. Then it can control us and manipulate us. But the point, why I'm saying this, is to the extent that any of us connect with our true nature. And what does that even mean? It's such a cliche, connect with your true nature. Well, I point out, what is our true nature? Our true nature, by its nature, is creative. So when you connect with your true nature, you embody and express yourself creatively. The more you do that, the deeper you have the realization of your nature. It's a positive feedback loop that creates light. And another way of expressing your true nature, our true nature, is that it's love, it's compassion, it's open-heartedness. So the idea is that when any of us embody that and really stabilize the realization of our true nature and model that for others and express ourselves through in that way of being a loving, compassionate, creative person, that's contagious. That starts to impact other, just like the alleged COVID virus was contagious. When any of us connect with our nature as love and compassion and creative beings, that's contagious. And that, can actually infect in a good way other people, and it can go viral. And so, just on a really day-to-day basis, to the extent that we stay in touch with our nature, with our soul, with our heart, with our love, and embody that. And part of that means to also be doing our inner work of reflecting. When we get into conflicts with our family members or our friends or our community, to try to reflect, okay, what part of me is touched? What part of me is triggered? What about my shadow? And to model, any of us modeling doing that, and then connecting with other people who are doing that. That's a real community. That's the Sangha of the Buddha. That's the mystical body of Christ. That has to do with I think in Kabbalah they talk about tikkun, idea, and I think it's related to that. So I think really coming together in community. And, in Buddhism now, there's the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the teacher, teaching, and community. Many teachers are saying the Sangha, the community, is the most important of the jewels right now, to have real community, to connect with other people who are also awakening. And you discover it's not a competitive sport. If I help you, I get as much benefit as you do. Because in essence, what Wetiko is identifying with the separate self, which doesn't even exist. As soon as I exist as a separate self, I'm an Israeli and Palestinians are others.
Right.
Well, as soon as there's others, there's fear. Fear is the superfood for Wetiko, and it self-regenerates. It's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. Okay? So the idea of seeing through that separate self, we actually depend on each other for our own well-being. There is no separate self. We are all in this together. We're being cooked in the soup together, to quote Jung. We're interconnected. We're not separate. The energetic expression of that is compassion. That's the Wetiko dissolver par excellence.
Can I just, this is very good. Everything you're saying is incredibly resonating. And just to slowly just put a spotlight on a point here, which is often, right, like when I'm connecting to my truth and to my inner voice or inner guidance, then often I have this dynamic of fearing what the others that I'm connecting to might think, like what my family might think, what my community might think, and takes a lot of courage to stand out and like go your own path. And you have to sort of like, kind of live with the risk that you would not be accepted. But then after like discovering your signal and your voice, you found those that resonate with what you feel internally. And that's like a different type of belonging or a different type of organization. That's what I'm hearing also,
Yeah.
or it influences.
A thing I want to say, what you said, I would almost like add something when you said, oh, when you're stepping into your light, you're afraid what other people are going to think. You know, to be more accurate, it's you're afraid what you think other people are going to think.
Of
Because
course, yes.
the origin of that is in your own mind. So when you realize that, then, you know, you get to choose. Oh, you know, do I just outsource my own authority and power and give it out there to other people, and then I'm okay if I'm imagining they're seeing me as okay? Or can I just see the world through my own eyes, you know? And that's to really take back that projection and to connect with our true empowerment. And what you said, it speaks to me really deeply because in my family, I was the one who was seeing what was happening. That there was this, you know, evil getting enacted, and just being an innocent, this naive young person, I was pointing at it, and I didn't understand that there was a risk in doing that. But by doing that, I became seen as the threat and the problem and the evil one and the abusive one and the bad one. I was the identified patient, and I got excommunicated from the family by doing that.
Right.
So I know, I mean, what you're saying isn't just a theory, that's the way it works. But with my teachers, these great, you know, spiritual teachers who I've known for 40 plus years, they're always saying, have courage. And it's like they can't say anything more than that. That's like, you know, the real essence. And I feel that, it's really, you know, that's our situation. Are we going to have enough courage? But you want to be skillful. You don't want to just step out on the world stage and speak your truth and then get murdered, get, you know, deplatformed, decensored, demonetized, you know, you can't make a living. And that's not, no, that won't help anyone. So, you know, you have to sort of, you know, I want to bring into the equation, you have to be skillful and take into account the non-local field, you know, that we're dealing with, and not just in a new agey magical thinking way going, oh, I'm just going to speak my truth and shine my light and everything will take care of itself. No, it's a little, you have to factor into the equation that, you know, we live in a time and in a world right now where it is dangerous to speak your truth, and you have to factor that in. And that doesn't mean to not speak your truth. That just means to not be naive.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is that there is not really a protocol or a procedure that, like, because when we approach a traumatic state, or when we approach such a state of deep denial and fear, what can we give to someone who is in such a state? How can we support them? How can we walk with them?
Yeah, well, you know, it brings up for me and I've written about this extensively, that the archetype of the shaman is the major archetype that's activated in the collective psyche, and you know, so we as a species are making a collective descent into the underworld of the unconscious, and we're going through this death sort of rebirth experience. But who is the shaman? What is that figure? Well, the shaman is the healer who's wounded. It's the wounded healer. The shaman is the creative artist. The shaman is the storyteller. The shaman is the dreamer. Okay? So the idea being that being a wounded healer, and I totally identify because of what happened with my encounter, you know, with Wetiko 40 plus years ago. I'm still processing the profound woundedness and trauma of that encounter. But the idea of the wounded healer is that there's somebody who, instead of trying to circumnavigate and go around their wound, no, they've experienced their wound. They've gone into their wound. So the wounded healer is somebody who's very comfortable and familiar with their own pain, with their own shadow, with their own wounding. So when they meet other people who are also wounded or traumatized or in pain, the wounded healer shaman, instead of just compulsively trying to fix them or give them advice, is very comfortable just being present with them and just being with them. And that's half of the healing. When somebody feels seen and heard and presenced, all of a sudden that can be a game changer for their process, you know?
Right. So this is really taking us also away from this dynamic of blaming and the backlash of blaming by defending that is happening on the world stage against Israel. Then it's really, and it's of course understandable, like atrocities are happening, of course one should point out to it, but there is an element of compassion that is also needed to be able to allow for whoever we are sitting with, ourselves or others that are meeting those very contracted states, to kind of open and let the energy flow and complete whatever is kind of stuck, right?
Yeah. And you know, what you were just saying, it makes me think of, see, what's hard. So I'm, you know, in the United States on the West Coast, so really, you know, far away from what's happening in the Middle East, and everything is beautiful here, and, you know, and all that. But more and more and more, I'm like turning in my own mind to deal with my own complicity in what's happening in Gaza. You know, I mean, just the fact that what Israel is doing, you know, in perpetrating this genocide, I'm colluding. I'm, as a member, as an American, I mean, my country is giving all the weapons and all the money, you know, that Israel, Netanyahu could never do that without, in a way, my complicity. And that's reflecting something. So on the one hand, you know, what can I, one person, you know, what can I do with that? But that's reflecting. That's showing me something about, Wetiko, you know, because we're all not separate as microcosms, as individuals. We're all not separate from the collective, from the macrocosm. That's reflecting, so I can feel like, okay, I'm impacted by, you know, this darkness, this Wetiko, this insanity, this evil that's in the collective field. Like a shaman, I'm taking it on and I'm falling ill myself and I'm impacted and I'm having it out with this darkness. But I'm also, the fact that I'm colluding as an American with what's happening in Gaza, how am I colluding with my own Wetiko in my mind? That's, you see, that's a really key question. Because, you know, I mean, who hasn't fallen asleep and acted out their unconscious? We all have. You know, that's the nature of becoming conscious. You first have to fall into and become taken over by the unconscious, act it out. But if we stay stuck in that, that's a big problem. The idea is to step out of that identity and to realize what we've done, and, you know, and in a way that's the shamanic journey between the subjective and the objective points of view, but that's a whole other story. But the point is for me to see, I'm actually colluding in my own victimization, you know, me personally. And if I'm struggling with my own darkness, it's not just, I can't just blame, my father did this or my mother did that. Yeah, on one level that's true, but that's irrelevant. They were just playing roles in my dreaming process. How am I unconsciously participating and colluding with the Wetiko in my own mind to be complicit in my own victimization? That's to really take responsibility, you know, and that's to start, you know, it's a very painful realization. So there is this priest, this German priest, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's amazing bodhisattva. And he escaped the Nazis in World War II, but felt like it was his mission to serve his people. So he came back to Germany, and he got executed by the Nazis a little while before, you know, the Allies freed Germany. It's very tragic. But he said something very interesting. He says, when we voluntarily choose to experience our pain, and I would add our shame or, you know, whatever, this spells death to evil. Okay, so all of us as Israelis, as Americans, as citizens of the world, we are all like feeling trauma around what's happening, around what we're all enacting on each other and how we're destroying the biosphere. We are literally committing collective suicide. We are all impacted by that, and there's an incredible pain around that. And so one of the answers to the question of what can we do, to the extent that instead of just splitting from our pain and disassociating from it and going numb or acting out our addictions, to just be with our pain and to be spacious with that. And that can actually help us to get in touch with the part of us that in a way is invulnerable to that pain, that can hold that pain. That's the self. That's our true nature. And that, in essence, what is being asked for all of us to do. And any one of us doing that, that realization instantaneously gets registered throughout the entire non-local field of the universe, making it more available for other people to have that realization. That's very inspiring when you realize that. And this isn't some sort of new age magical thinking. This is, our situation.
Yeah. I just want to underline what the seed of it, which is being willing to feel my pain, to feel pain, and to be spacious about it, to really give space for it. So we're reaching the end of our time together, Paul. It's been so rich and full of very useful information and enlightening. Just your generosity, and thank you so much. And I want to wrap this up with to tune into more of a meditative practice for a moment, and whoever is watching can also do it with us and kind of lean back. And I want to create a little safe container to maybe also to grieve or to feel the pain of what is the worst case scenario here? Like, where are we going if we are not waking up? What is not in order to manifest it, but really just to give space to what we are about to face if this is not going the way we are hoping it can go. What do you see as the worst case scenario here?
The worst case scenario, I think of that nightmare. We are literally creating a nightmare beyond belief. And, because Wetiko, when it gets into an organism and it's gotten into the human species, it destroys everything within its sphere of influence, including itself, ultimately. Mm-hmm. So, I don't really want to go there very much because it's very clear that trajectory is not something that I want to contribute to. But I want to just circle back to that idea of being spacious with your pain. One of the main ways that I do that, because I'm in incredible pain. I think we all are, and the pain of what's happening in the world, the pain of being excommunicated by my family, or the abuse from my father, or, whatever. I could tell many, many stories. But the idea is, or the point I want to really communicate, to the extent that when I'm in meditation and all of a sudden I feel my trauma, I feel my pain, and my habitual unconscious response is to want it to go away, is to contract against it, right? Is to split from it, is to disassociate from it. But what if I cultivate the awareness of, let me feel this pain, because it's what is arising, it's what's happening in the moment. What if, and this is just imagination, what if me feeling this pain really fully, because it is how the present moment is manifesting, is there a part of me that would be willing to feel this pain really fully if no one else would ever have to feel this pain? And I really ask myself that question every time I start meditation, and I realize, there is this one little part of me that is willing to do that. That's the bodhisattva part of me. That's the true nature that would willingly, voluntarily choose to feel this pain if no one else would ever have to feel it. And by cultivating that attitude, more and more what happens, I begin to embrace the pain. I begin to welcome it. And I'm beginning to embrace my present moment experience. But I can only do that if I actually am recognizing that other people, including the Palestinians, are not separate from me, okay?
Right.
And that's to cut through the separate self. That's to realize our interconnectedness. And the more and more that I'm embracing my pain, I'm embracing my present moment experience. Keep in mind, before I began doing this, I was in pain, but I was kicking and screaming and wanting it to go away. Where now, I'm still feeling the pain, but I'm welcoming it and I'm embracing it. And oftentimes, that experience can turn into some form of ecstasy. And when I feel that, that's when I start doing my prayers and my spiritual practice and my meditation, because then I feel like I'm connected with my nature. And the other thing I also feel it's really important for people in Israel, or all around the world, not just Israel, to connect with other beings who are also awakening from the spell. There's massive mind control and propaganda being perpetrated via the mainstream media and through all the organs of propaganda in the legacy media. And those organs of propaganda have been internalized inside of our own mind to the point where we propagandize ourselves. So when you connect with other people, it's like when I met you, Faye. When we met, I think we both right away recognized, oh, here's a fellow awakening being who's snapped out of, to whatever degree we have, the propaganda, the lies, and we can actually help each other. What I'm saying is when we come together in a real spiritual community with other people who are also awakening, the definition of a bodhisattva is a being in the process of awakening. And who among us is not a latent bodhisattva in training? So what I'm saying is connect with each other, and then we can activate our genius, our collective genius, by hanging out with each other in a way that we can't do when we're just isolated by our own selves. And then we could conspire to co-inspire each other. That's a real conspiracy theory, and we can literally dream ourselves awake. And that's not just some sort of new age woo-woo theory. That's what Wetiko is offering us. And if we don't do that, I would say we are doomed, But this is completely readily available to us, to all of us.
Right.
And so that's what I would really want to offer to people.
Right. So as you were speaking, I was preparing to ask you what would be the best case scenario, but I feel you already sort of sketched it out, which is like to be connected to our true self in creativity and in connection to others who are also doing it, and just creating beautiful moments with each other. I guess that would be a best case scenario from this situation.
Yeah. And don't underestimate the power of love and of compassion. And I'm not just somebody who's like all love and light. No, I've been pointing out the profound importance of shedding light on evil. We need to deal with evil. Jung is saying that there's this something mysterious that God in a way has put into evil that's most important for us to know. So we just can't in a one-sided way let's all focus on love and light and ignore evil. No, by turning a blind eye to evil, we're feeding evil. We need to come to terms with what is being revealed to us through the darkness, but then to connect with other people who are genuinely doing their work of confronting their own darkness in themselves. How can I possibly be of help to the darkness in the world if I'm not aware of the darkness in myself? If I try to do that by stepping out into the world, I'm just going to be adding to the darkness. That's why it's so profoundly important for us to shed light on our own darkness. And then we're able to step into the world and hopefully shed light on the darkness of the world and help other people.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's been extremely profound and beautiful and enlivening for me to be here with you in this talk. I just want to say if there is any last words you want to share, or anything else that comes to mind before we complete this conversation.
Totally. Thank you. Yeah. What just spontaneously fell in my head as you were asking me that was that because of the increased pressure in the alchemical vase, the vessel of the human psyche right now, particularly if you're living in Israel, but anywhere on the planet, the pressure in our minds, in the alchemical container of our psyche, is so profoundly intense. It's actually easier to awaken if we're holding that creative tension with awareness, without splitting and without polarizing and without projecting the shadow. But if we're able to hold that creative tension, out of that something, one word, Jung calls it the transcendent function, some form of grace or blessing or the creative spirit emerges out of that. So, the one other thing I want to say going along with that, I think there's a French proverb going, oh, this is no time for pessimism. We'll save that for better times. Okay? The idea being that if we become pessimistic because we have all the evidence to show, oh, things are really, bad, then we're part of the problem. Then we're unwittingly being a minion for Wetiko. But quantum physics is saying, no, at each and every moment, this universe is pulsing in and out of the void every nanosecond, And even if something is ridiculously highly unlikely, it could manifest in this very next moment, which is to say that the fact that maybe one of us right now awakening to our nature could be the very moment that energy of realization gets deposited into the psi bank, the PSI, the collective unconscious of our species, and catalyzes a global awakening. Quantum physics says that is absolutely positively possible. And I would add, and if you're not envisioning that, then what in the world are you thinking?
This is so good. Yeah, I was like hearing in void we trust, this really position of being open to all possibilities and to not forget that it can be solved in a second. We can awaken in a moment, in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Paul, and thank you so much for this, and wish us all a good journey on. Yeah,
really, I'm just so appreciative to you. Just can't thank you enough for the invite. Thank you.
Okay.